Catherine Stitching Chronicles, my channel where I talk about my love of all things cross stitch. And welcome to a Flosstube Extra where I'm going to show you how I dye my own cross stitch fabric. So before I get into it, I just want to say, this is not a tutorial. I am just showing you what I do to achieve some of the fabrics that I have. I'm also not taking creative credit for any of the techniques that I used or the methods that I follow. I didn't come up with any of this myself. I learned by watching other Flosstube videos where people showed how they dye their own fabrics. So a couple of videos that come to mind are those from Megan the Seattle Stitcher and also Pansy Stitches. So they both have really great videos where they show how they dye their fabrics, and they're both really talented. So definitely check them out as well. But all this is to say that I'm no creative mastermind. I learned from watching others. When it comes to dyeing, I find that there's a lot of trial and error and just a matter of figuring out what works for you. There's not really a right or a wrong way to do this. I mean, it's just whatever works and whatever gives you the results that you want and that you're happy with. So, I mean, really you can do whatever you want as long as you like the final product. So now I'm going to jump over to some clips that I filmed not too long ago where I showed the process of how I dyed 2 pieces of fabric, and then I'll come back to show you the final results.
Okay, hi everyone. So I have moved my filming setup to my bathroom. This is definitely not the most glamorous setup, and I feel like it is a little bit echoey in here, so hopefully the sound is okay. And just bear with me because I've never filmed from this angle before. So, woohoo. This setup is not the best, but I'm doing my best and trying something new. So here we are. So before I get started, I'm just going to show you the materials that I have and what I'm going to be using and how I use them. So, first off, of course, most importantly is the dye. So I use RIT dye. So this is in a liquid form. I believe you can buy this in a powder as well. But I just buy the bottles that are already in liquid form. So I don't have a lot of colors, but I have kind of a handful. So I have those 3, and then I also have tan, charcoal gray, and a purple. So this is just what I have. I went to the store and just kind of picked out some random colors that I thought I wanted. And I would like to get more and expand my collection a little bit, but this is what I have for now. So that's my dye. And then as far as containers that I use, so the one that I use, or that I have used most, is actually just an old yogurt container. So it's a 750 gram container. It's the perfect size for scrunching up fabric that isn't too big. If you have a really big piece, I would find this a little bit small, but for kind of smaller pieces, this works perfectly fine. Because you'll see when I dye my fabric, I kind of crumple it up and fit it into the container. And in order for that to work, the container kind of has to be on the smaller side so that when you crumple up the fabric, it stays crumpled. So this works really, really well for that. I do also have this plastic bin. There, you can see it's a 6-quart bin. I just found this at Walmart. So I actually use this to store my bottles in when I'm not using them. But I actually used this when I dyed my fabric for the Blackwater Siren Stitch Along from Bella Filipina. The piece of fabric for that was about a ½ yard. It was quite huge actually. And this container would have been way too small to fit all that fabric. So I actually dyed it in this container. So yeah, I use that for really big dyeing projects and just for storage the rest of the time. And then I just have this little tiny, I think this is a salad dressing container, something like this, or a little cup or something. So if I want to mix up dye colors, or even if I'm just using one color and I just want to dilute it a little bit, then I'll put it in here and mix it together rather than pouring the dye directly onto the fabric. This way it's just a little bit more controlled I can test the color ahead of time, see if I like it. And then when I'm pouring it in, again, it's a little bit more controlled and I'm working with a small amount rather than trying to pour from the big bottle and potentially pouring like way more than I mean to. So that's what I use that for. And then, this is also important, don't forget rubber gloves. If you get dye on your skin, like it's really not a big deal. Like it will wash out eventually, but I mean, no one wants to be walking around looking like they have Smurf fingers, so I highly recommend using gloves. I learned this the hard way when I was dyeing, again, my fabric for the Blackwater Siren Stitch Along, and what I had done a few test pieces of fabric and I managed to not get any dye on my skin or my clothes or anything. So I was like, oh, I don't need gloves. And then I tried dyeing the big piece and like my fingers were totally stained blue. So just wear the gloves. Finally, of course, you will need fabric. So I have two pieces here. So this is just some Zweigart 28 count white linen. So when I was dyeing my fabric for the Blackwater Siren Cell, I knew I needed a pretty huge piece. So I just ordered a full yard. So I've used about half of this already for that sal, and I will be using this fabric as well for the Extraordinary Bird Stitch Along from Lola Crow Cross Stitch, and that's one of the pieces that I'll be dyeing today. So I just need to pull this out and cut it to the size I want, but yeah, this is just plain white linen, and makes a pretty good base for dyeing. And then here's another piece that I'm going to be using today. So this is just a piece of Ada that I had in my stash. I have no idea where it came from. I've inherited stash from quite a few people over the years, and it was just in my box of stuff. You can see compared to the linen, like it's quite yellow. And like, I'm never going to use this. I know I'm never going to use this the way it is. So I'm going to go ahead and dye over it and make it into something fun that I know I'm going to use. So the base is quite yellow, but I think with the colors that I'm going to use over it, I don't think that's going to be a problem. So just keep that in mind as well. Like when you're dyeing, if you are dyeing on a colored fabric, depending what it is and kind of the look you're going for, just keep that in mind when you're picking colors and when you're dyeing, because chances are it will show through a little bit. So those are all my supplies, and now let's get to the fun part. All right, so I've got my gloves on. And so step number one is to get the fabric completely soaked in water. So I've done that already. This is the piece of Ada that I showed you earlier. So I've drenched it in water. So it is all nice and wet. So I'm actually going to use the bigger container at first, because I'm going to start with here, tan, and do a dye first with this color before doing something darker. So yeah, something to keep in mind when you're dyeing, like you want to do the lightest color first. If you do a dark color and then try and do a lighter color on top, it's not going to show up. So I always start with the lightest and then go darker. So here's another good demonstration actually. So this piece of fabric is 12 by 18. So I want to pretty much evenly dye all my fabric more or less the same way. So I don't want it to be crumpled up too much, but say that I wanted a really mottled look. So I would crumple up the fabric more and then pour the dye over so that it absorbed it really unevenly. You can see in this container, like I can almost lay it down flat. So this is not going to give me very much modeling. It's going to be more even over the entire piece of fabric. So this is kind of what I mean when talking about container size. So when I put it in here and it's basically flat, whereas if I crumple it up to fit it in here, I mean, that's a very rough demonstration, but you can see like I have to crumple it much more to fit it in here. So I'm just going to put this in here. And yeah, I wanted to start with tan. So I'm going to give that a good shake. sometimes the dye can kind of stay in little concentrated clumps. So I like to just shake it up and still have the seal on the top there. Hang on, I forgot that was there. Just pull that off. All right, so I'm not gonna mix this with anything, but I am gonna mix it with water just to help dilute it and make it go further. So I'm gonna pour this in here. There we go. And I'm just gonna mix this with a little bit of water. There we go. So in this case, I'm not mixing colors together, but if I was, then you can use an extra piece of fabric and just dip it in there to test the color. Or if you don't have any like fabric strips handy, you can just use some paper towel or even toilet paper and just fold it up and dip that in to see how the color comes out and if you like the look of it. So, I'm just gonna pour this right over and then kind of mix it in the container. I might add a little bit more water to the container, but for now I'm just gonna pour it in and see what happens. There we go. So I did end up adding a little bit of hot water, again, just to kind of dilute it and spread it around a little further. I want this pretty much to get the whole piece more or less evenly. So I've kind of tried to mix it around a little bit, and you can see in these parts where it's more crumpled, it will have a little bit of modeling to it, but hopefully this will come out relatively even. So I'm gonna let this sit for a while, probably around 20 minutes, and then I'll come back and see how it looks. All right, so it's actually been longer than 20 minutes, but I got a phone call, so I had to take that, and this was left sitting in the container for a bit longer than I planned, but that's okay. So I'm gonna take this out, I'm gonna pour out the extra water there, and then I'm gonna rinse this out and wring it out as much as I possibly can until the water is clear or fairly close to clear. All right, so that looks pretty clear. So let's see. All right, so when this started, it was a pretty yellow piece of fabric, and I did tan over top. So there's not much of a change here, but overall it is definitely, you know, different looking than it was. It's a bit more tan than yellow, which is pretty much what I was going for. So I think when I do my next dye, I think I want to do that in my smaller container so it's a little bit more mottled. So I have another piece of fabric in there right now. So I'm gonna have to wait until that container frees up again. So I'm just gonna set this aside in the meantime. So I'm gonna use my yogurt container again for this, and then I'm gonna go in with wine and try and get a nice dark red on top of this. So we'll see how that works out. So I'm gonna crumple this up. get it into my yogurt container. There we go. Yeah, that's okay. So I'm gonna take my dye, give it a good mix. Dilute this a tad. But I want this to be pretty dark, so I'm not gonna do too much. And then, so here's my fabric. I'll just pour it down the side. So I'm gonna leave this to sit. I want this to be pretty concentrated, so I will leave this one actually for probably about 15 minutes and then come back to check on it. All right, moment of truth here. It's been about 15 minutes. I'm feeling good about this one. All right, let's take a look. Ooh, this looks cool. So this one, well, didn't turn out quite the way I was expecting, but I'm kind of into it. Yeah, I kind of like that. Oh, I like this side a little better, actually. Ooh, yeah, that's cool. All right, so awesome. Same with my other piece. I'm gonna leave this out to dry and then give it a good iron, and we'll see what the finished product looks like when it's dry. All right, so this piece of fabric is going to be for the Extraordinary Birds stitch along, which is the upcoming Lola Crow cross stitch sal, which I'm super excited for. So I've completely soaked this piece of fabric. I've cut it down to size, and I'm going to try to dye something kind of similar to the called for fabric. It's not going to look exactly like it, but that's the kind of vibe that I'm going to go for using the dyes that I have. I didn't want to have to buy anything extra for this. So for this one, I want to get a bit more modeling on this one. So I'm going to use my little yogurt container. So I'm going to take my fabric, which again is soaked with water, and I'm going to crumple this up and pull the cat hair out of it while I'm at it. There's cat fur on everything I own. So I'm going to crumple it up, and I'm like not being that intentional with it, but I'm not just throwing it in a ball either. Like I'm putting some thought into it, but I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? So there, I've got it all crumpled here, and I'm gonna squish it down into my container. So the sal on 14 count fabric, or in this case, 28 count, is about 13 by 16. So I cut this piece to be about 18 by 21, I think. So I did about a 2.5 inch margin on each side, which is more than enough for me. I know some people like to do a bigger margin than that, but 2 to 3 inches, in my opinion, is plenty. So that's about how big my piece of fabric is, and I've got it nice and crumpled in here. So next what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run hot water and I'm gonna fill this up almost to the top of the fabric. I'll show it to you again in a second, but I'm gonna just about cover my fabric, but not entirely. So there, I'm not sure you're really going to be able to see, but the water is, hang on, what if I turn on the light? There. Oh, there, you can see the water a little bit. So it's just about to the top of my fabric, but some bits are still sticking out. I'm actually going to put a little bit more water. There we go. So now I'm gonna take my little container again. Okay, we're back. I got cut off there. I got a phone call that I had to take. So to continue on from where we were. So I've got my fabric all crumpled up in here and I've got water filled up. So it's almost at the top of the fabric, but not quite. And that is hot water. And I'm just gonna add a little bit more. I feel like the water soaked in a little bit when I was on the phone. So that's in the sink. So now I'm gonna take my dye. So this is tan. Shake it up to make sure there's no particles in there that are gonna be more concentrated. And I'm gonna pour this into my little container. Now I'm gonna dilute this a little bit with some more water. There we go. And now I'm gonna take this and pour it into my container. And I'm gonna go kind of down the sides of the fabric along the side of the container, and you'll see what I mean in a second. Just adjust my grip here. So I'm gonna go, hopefully you can see, kind of down the side there. So see how it's at the side of the container? Then kind of swish it around a little bit. Turn this around, go down the other sides. There we go. So you can see where the water is sitting and how not every piece of the fabric is going to be hit evenly with the dye. So that's the purpose of crumpling it up like this. And then you're not going to have the same coverage, and that's going to give you that modeling effect. So nice push down in there. So I'm going to let this sit 15 to 20 minutes, see how it's looking, and then we'll pull it out and see how it looks. Okay, so I actually decided to only leave this for more like 10 to 15 minutes. I just kind of changed my mind about how long I want to leave it, and I don't really want the tan to be too dark. So at this point, I'm gonna dump it into the sink, rinse it out, wring it out as best I can until the water runs clear, and then we'll move on to the next step. she's looking. Okay, so, I mean, that's pretty much the effect I wanted. It's a little more around the edges than I thought, but that's okay. Let's see here. How do I want to do this? Oh yeah, that looks the way I wanted it to though. Oh, look at that splotch right there. That's cool. Okay, so now I'm basically gonna do that exact same thing. I'm gonna re-crumple it again, and then I'm gonna go in with my next color. I'm just gonna rinse this out. There's like a little bit of dye left over in there. So again, I'm just crumpling it up, and I'm gonna put it, go back into my container here. So there's nice and squished down in there. And fill it back up with water, again, to almost cover the fabric, but not quite. So you can see the edge of the water is just under the top of the fabric. I'm gonna go up with a little bit more. All right, so the next color I'm gonna go in with is aquamarine. So I'm not gonna mix this with any other color or anything. I'm just gonna shake it up to make sure that it's, you know, there's no clumps of dye or anything. Dilute it with water and then pour it in. Go. All right. Get a good grip on my container. So here's my fabric in here. So I'm going to pour down the side of the container onto the fabric. There we go. And then I'm going to rotate, do the same thing all around. So that's actually pretty concentrated. So I think that might actually be enough. So I'm gonna leave that and come back in about 15 minutes and we'll see what we're working with. Okay, so it's been not quite 15 minutes. But honestly, this was a little bit more concentrated than I thought it was going to be. So I'm just going to dump it out, see how it's looking, and then decide if I want to do anything further or leave it as is. So let's see. Okay, so this is how we're looking. This side is quite concentrated with the color. And then here we go. There's another really concentrated patch. I'm not sure what I want to do. I think, kind of hard to show you the full piece at this angle, but I think what I want to do is go back in a third time, and I have my aquamarine left in this container. I think I'm gonna add a touch of charcoal gray to make it a bit of a darker blue and do one more go. And I won't leave it in the water for very long. I just want to get one more layer, I think, on top of this. And then I think I'll be good. So I'm gonna do that. So good and smushed in there. And I'm gonna cover it with water. I actually got a little bit more water than I wanted that time. There, let's try this. Okay. So I have my aquamarine. So I'm gonna just do a touch of charcoal gray. I'm gonna do a little swish. Actually dilute it a little bit further because I found it was a little bit too strong last time. Now, I did not think to get a little extra strip of Aida or linen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna grab some toilet paper, or I can get paper towel. And just fold that up and use that to dip into the dye. See how the color is. Okay, so that's a little bit darker than it was. I think I actually want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm gonna go back in with my charcoal and add a little bit more and then try it again. All right, let's see how that looks. Okay, so that's a little bit darker. I'm gonna go with that and we're gonna see how this turns out. That's what's fun about dyeing. It's all just one big experiment. Okay, so. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm gonna add back a little bit more water. Oh my gosh, I cannot make up my mind. There, okay. So I'm gonna take my dye and again, go right down the side. Do a little bit there, and I'm gonna do a little bit down here as well. Actually, I'm gonna not go from that angle. There we go. There. That's enough. So I'm gonna leave that just for a few minutes, and then we'll take it back out. Okay, so this has only been in here for about 5 minutes, but I think that's gonna be enough. So I'm gonna pour it out and we'll see the final result. so I just pulled it out and the bottom part looks great. I'm really happy with this, but I'll be honest, I want a little bit more dye on this middle section here. So I'm actually gonna put it in a fourth time. I'm gonna do exactly what I just did, but I'm gonna try to leave this part more exposed at the top so that it gets more of the dye on it, and then we should be good. So I'm gonna do exactly what I just did, put it in for another 5 minutes or so, and then that should be the end. Okay, so it has been another 5 minutes or so. So hopefully I'm happy with it now. This is the beauty of dyeing your own stuff, right? I mean, you can experiment and do whatever you want until it looks the way you want it to. So let's see. Okay, moment of truth. Oops, some loose threads on the side here. I should have taped or serged the edges or something before I started. Obviously, I did not do that, but ideally you would, and then you wouldn't have this problem. But anyway, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I like that better than I did before. Okay, yeah, I'm super happy with this. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna hang it up to dry, and then give it a good press, and I will show you the finished product before the end of this video.
Okay, I'm back. So I hope that was helpful and informative, and hopefully the filming was okay. I had a bit of an awkward setup in my bathroom because I was trying to show everything, but hopefully it turned out okay. So now I have the fabrics with me, they're fully dried, and I can show you how they turned out. So the first one I'll show you is the piece of 28 count linen that I dyed to use for the upcoming stitch along from Lola Crow Cross Stitch, the theme of which is extraordinary birds. So this is the final piece. I'm so happy with how this one turned out. It's like exactly what I was picturing. So I was able to get really good modeling and like colors showing with the tan first there. Like this is a really good corner down here. And then I did dye a few times with the blue. And yeah, I'm like thrilled with how it turned out actually. So I have the floss for the style here as well. So I have it like on these plastic cards. So I don't think I'm going to be able to show you very well like all of it, but just to kind of get an idea, like there's such bright fun colors and I think they're really going to pop on this fabric. When it came to choosing a fabric for this sal, she did suggest, or she did say like to make sure that white would show up well. And I think it will. I mean, on camera, I think some of the lighter spots are gonna look pretty much just white, but even the very lightest spots do have some dye on them. So like it might blend in a little bit in some areas, but overall I think that the white will show up on here. So I don't see that being an issue. So what's today? March 22nd. The frame comes out for this, I believe, at the beginning of April. So it's coming up very, very soon and I can't wait. I'm so unbelievably excited because her stitch alongs are amazing. So yeah, this is my fabric for that sal. And then the other piece that I dyed, I have right here. So this is the 14 count Aida. And I really like how this one turned out too, actually. I don't know what I'm gonna use this for just yet. So this one's just gonna go into my stash, and when I feel like using it, I'll pull it out. This one I think is a really good example too, to show just like how it looks on each side of the fabric. Like both sides of fabric are not gonna look the same. So like on this side, the modeling is a bit more obvious and there's a bit more beige showing. But if I flip it around, this side is a bit more of that burgundy color and less of the beige. So when you dye your own fabric, or even when you get hand dyed fabric, I mean, like sometimes there is a right and a wrong side, but I just use whatever side I like better. And sometimes like here, for example, there's like kind of that really dark splotch. So if you want that to be showing on a particular piece, then you can kind of position your work to show specific parts of the fabric that you like the most. So yeah, I really like this actually. No idea what to do on it. If you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to let me know, because I got nothing. But in the meantime though, it's very pretty to look at. So I may have talked about this a little bit when I was actually dyeing the fabrics, I don't remember. But I feel that I have a like decent understanding of color theory and kind of how to make that work for me. And I also, you know, I have what, 5 or 6 colors or so of dye, and like I just mix my own colors and I try to work with what I have. But if you need help or you want to try and make a specific color, if you go on the Rit Dye website, they have a color chart on their website, which is a super helpful tool. So say you're looking for a particular shade of like blue or green or whatever, then you can look for it, open it up, and it'll tell you which colors of red dye you need and how much of each one to use to create a certain color. So that can be super helpful as well if you're going for something really particular. In my case, like for this piece, I mean, I was going for something particular, and in that case I had colors that I could like make work for me. But if there was a certain shade that I wanted to create and I didn't have the dye for it, then I would go on there and figure out what I would need to get that particular color. While I'm here, I also thought that I would pull out some other fabrics that I've dyed before. And like I've showed them before on my channel, but I thought I would pull them out and kind of explain how I dyed each one. So the first one I'll show is my fabric for the Blackwater Siren Stitch Along. So I show this on my channel a lot. Is that the right way? Yes, it's the right way. So it's a pretty huge piece of fabric. So this is what the full thing looks like right now, but I'm just gonna fold it up and kind of show one corner up close and explain like the steps that I followed. So I'll just show you this corner up close. So this piece of fabric was white when I started. So first I scrunched this up and I put it in that big plastic container that you would have seen earlier. And I scrunched it up in there and I dyed it in the green first. And I did that because it was the lightest color. So I started with the green, and it's Kelly green, I think is the name of the dye. And I mixed it with a little bit of charcoal gray just to make it a little bit darker and grungier. So I scrunched it up in there and then rinsed it out. And then I repeated those steps with the blue and the purple. So to get the blue, There's not any like super blue pieces on here, but it's kind of mixed in with the other colors. But I went with the blue next because that was the next darkest color. So to get this blue, I mixed aquamarine and charcoal gray. I think red dye has like a darker blue dye, but again, I just wanted to use what I had. So I mixed aquamarine and charcoal gray to get blue, and then I took it out, rinsed it out, and then I repeated that again with purple and charcoal gray mixed together to get the darkest purple color. So I'm so proud of this fabric. I think it turned out so cool. And I'll just show you the full thing again. Like, obviously I haven't mastered the art of like intentional placement of dye because like over here, you know, it's quite dark and there's kind of these big splotches of color, whereas on this corner it's all kind of more like blended together. So again, like I'm no expert and I'm still learning and figuring it out, but that's the process that I followed for this, and I love how it turned out. So the last piece that I have to share that I dyed myself is my fabric for Butterfly Bouquet from Sprouting Lupine. Someone please correct me if it's Sprouting Lupine or Sprouting Lupin, because I don't want to say it wrong, but I'm not really sure which one it is. So Sprouting Lupine / Sprouting Lupin, whatever it is. This is Butterfly Bouquet. So this was a piece of light pink Aida that I had that I was never going to use. So I scrunched this up in my yogurt container and dyed it with wine. Now, if I recall, I watered it down quite a bit, so like it wasn't super pigmented, and I didn't want it to be super dark. Like I just wanted a dark pink. I didn't want it to be like full burgundy. So this is how it turned out, and I'm like over the moon with this one too. I mean, it's exactly what I was picturing, and I really like, oh, there's fluff on here. Sorry. I really like monochromatic modeling like this. Like it can be, I mean, well, there's quite a bit of contrast between these two colors on here, but in other cases, like it can be really subtle, but it just adds some texture and makes it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more fun. And like, there's nothing wrong with using plain colored fabrics. I mean, I do it all the time, but having a little modeling on there just adds something extra. And I think I want to do this with a few more fabrics that I have. I do have just some other plain colors that I've had for a long time and I don't think I'm ever going to use. So why not repurpose them and make it into something that I'm a little bit more drawn to? So that is all that I have to show you for fabrics that I've dyed. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. It was fun to make and a little bit different than what I normally do. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know if you've ever tried dyeing your own cross stitch fabric or if you're planning to give it a try. So let me know in the comments because I'd love to hear from you. So I'll see you again soon for a regular Flosstube update, probably at the end of March. So until then, happy stitching!